I was walking in the town with a friend, and we saw these two chaps coming by, and they just said a couple of things to us, and we sort of acknowledged them, sort of thing. And Arthur just sort of whizzed around and said, "Oh, I'm having Ruth." And then we only talked for a moment or so, and then they went their way, and we went where we were going. And my friend said afterwards, "Oh, I didn't really like the look of those very much. They look like a couple of boxers." And I thought to myself, well, I don't know. I think I rather did, actually. And then because he didn't have a family home at the time, he was living in lodgings. He sent messages via the ladies that worked there, and they'd come up with a little note that he'd written to me, and then he asked about going out. But when I met up with him, I was quite impressed because we got taken to the upstairs seats in the cinema, whereas if I went myself, I always sat in the lower ones. And then he bought some, I think we bought some sort of chocolates anyway from where they sell them at the counter there. And I thought, oh, this is very nice that you're eating chocolates in the top part of the cinema. And it sort of progressed on from there when we went around for quite a long time. And then I think I got it in my head, which is rather silly, but you do these things. And I thought, oh, I don't know, I shouldn't really. I just thought that Arthur was getting a bit almost. See, he decided in his mind then that I was the one. Not that I was to know that, because I was 16 at the time. And I thought, oh, I should perhaps sort of see some other people. So I thought it was a kindly way perhaps of putting Arthur off. I pretended that someone else had asked me out and I'd rather go out with them. But actually definitely took a real huff about that. But I didn't know that he was sort of so serious-minded about me, and because he was so upset that is what made him decide that he would have a career he would leave over and go in the army. So I went whizzing off down there, and he met me quite amiably, and we had a talk and walked along the Admiralty Pier, which was a place that we often walked, because that was in the area where he's living. And he said, "Oh, I'd like it if we could get engaged. You think, or get?" I said, "Well, I would like to get married." I said, "Oh, I don't think my mum and dad will let me get married at my age," because I was the dizzy heights of 18 and a half at the time. But I said, I might be able to get engaged. I said, well, I would like to know that we'd sort of sorted that out before I go, because he was due to do a 2-year posting. So I had to write and tell Arthur that my dad was agreed for us to get married, and then he had to write an official letter and ask for my hand, which is what you did. And I then had to, because we were both underage, and I remember saying he got buttonholed by the padre quite a bit. Why on earth was a young man of 20, because he wasn't 21 yet, who was joined the SAS and going off, why on earth are you married? They all thought that I would be pregnant. Is she pregnant? Why are you marrying her? Well, because we're going to, and we want a home. And I think because knowing now how Arthur's background was, he did look to me to sort of be a bit of a rock. And because I'd come from a solider, different sort of a background than he had, and he wanted a home, I think. So he wanted someone specifically to sort of think about, I suppose. And my auntie, who'd come down to come to the wedding, one of my mum's sisters, said, well, Ruth and Arthur can use my flat if they like for a week, and I'll stop down here in the parents' house. So that was our week honeymoon we had there. And my sister had said for the second week that we could go and stop out with her. She lived out at Temple Ewell, so we'd stop out there. She and her husband would be at work all day. So that is how we started our married life like that. And I think we got married on the 2nd of June, and he flew away to go to Malaya because he was going out to the jungles. He went on the 23rd. So that was my little period of married life. And then afterwards it was always writing all the time, because he would always be writing, because I used to get airdrops into the jungle. And obviously I just carried on working like I did, and I'm sure a few people were rather curious to see what happened regarding my figure or whatever, but there was nothing to find. Where my mum shopped in the Maypole for our groceries, the manager said, if Ruth would like to come and work here, I've got a job for a junior assistant. So I'd got a job lined up before I left school, so I felt quite chuffed about that, and I'm sure I was earning a princely sum of £1.19 and 6, something like that. I know it was just under £2, which was an average, a sort of thing what you would expect. And you paid your mum the board and lodging, so I gave my mum the £1. I know what my dad had already arranged that I would help, or he'd asked that I would help with paying towards the TV, because Ready Fusion had been installed then, and we'd had that for a little time, and he thought when Ruth goes to work she could put a bit towards that, so we wouldn't have to pay so much. And other than that, you went out to the pictures, of which you done a couple of times a week or so, and whatever other activities I think you wanted to do. Oh, and bought you some new clothes. And I think by then I was at the great age of something like 19 and a half or something. And actually I've never done full-time work since, so that's great in some respects. And well, we both decided that we didn't want a family straight away, although we didn't see each other, as you would say, as often as people that lived together and their husbands went to work every day. It was different, because even if the regiment was still in England, they were on exercises or things like that all the time. So we left a gap so that we were just ourselves to please, which was I liked it very much, and it was really a growing up and getting to know each other properly, really, in a proper married life. I was very lucky that Arthur got a lot of fun and play and things in his role. So lots of times he was more in the front of things like that, and I was sort of a little bit set back, a little bit reserved about it. But he used to be in there playing and made things probably more enjoyable, and he was very hands-on, and he didn't mind messing about. And you could even get, sometimes some different men didn't push the pram or anything like that. It was not a man thing to do, but Arthur never bothered about stuff like that, and he would quite happily push a pram, carry a child on his shoulders, whatever else was asked of him. And as the girls will remember, when they were quite bigger girls, he used to come down from where we parked the car in the garages with a girl on each shoulder, so he was quite a strong man. But he helped me a lot. And of course I was always a little bit self-conscious, this sort of person, that I didn't want children to make a show of me. So I always wanted quite good behaviour, really, especially if he was out anywhere, because I would feel that I hadn't been bringing him up properly, or I would be right embarrassed. I couldn't be someone that would ball my head off in the street or anything like that at them. And I thought, I brought them up expecting them to do as they were told, up to a certain extent, like you do. And I know my girls have said to me later that they always knew just how far they could go, because they knew by the changed look on my face that if anybody had done anything sort of further, naughtiness, whatever it was, they knew they'd be getting a clout, because I did use the clout, and I make no bones about that. They got clouted, which you often see people with children now, and I think they could do with a good clout, but there you are. Well, the pit clothes wasn't very good, and the jobs went, but we got quite a good redundancy money. And then, and Arthur actually bought me a diamond ring then, and he said you should have that because that's the first diamonds that I'd had. Not that it was as dear as all that, but it was brilliant to have. And we decided to buy our council house, and we were going to own a house, which was something we'd never bothered about. The fact that we was council tenant, and you did whatever you did to your house yourself anyway, and looked after it like you would. But to be a house owner, I think, was really something. I think we greatly enjoyed the grandchildren when they came along. And of course Arthur was at the front there playing and rolling about on the floor and giving people rides and stuff like that. He was never held back from I never got embarrassed. I think that's the thing, sometimes I've got too embarrassed to enjoy yourself, really. The fear of making yourself look a fool, I think it is, but I mean that other didn't, and people just enjoyed playing about with him. And I think I enjoyed that period with and the grandchildren all came at sort of quite stages with quite gaps in between, depending when my children had their children. And so that went on because we were grandparents in our 40s, our 50s and our 60s. So